Hello and welcome back. I'm Sid Vicious and today we're diving deep into some news from Path of Exile 2. We were recently given a ton of information from an interview with Jonathan Rogers conducted by Kripparrian. Now, there are a bunch of things that were talked about such as bosses, endgame content, campaign, and a few other features within the game. So let's get right into it. In Path of Exile 2, skills like Righteous Fire are staying, confirmed in the interview itself. And don't worry, it's still Path of Exile, which means skills will be accessible across different classes, like a duelist using Shapeshifting. This flexibility ensures that PoE 2 retains the essence of what makes PoE unique. Also, Jonathan talked about minions briefly and how they are focused on having clarity. When we talk about minions in Path of Exile, we have to bring up one name in particular, Gazi. And guess what? Gazi will be having an interview coming up with Jonathan Rogers, so I'm hoping to get more details about minions during their discussion. Let's talk about changes that affect new players such as Flasks, Crafting Bench, and the campaign. Big news on the Flasks, only blue and higher tier mobs will recover Flask charges, emphasizing resource management. This change aims to reduce the Flask piano effect and make Flask more of a strategic use. Jonathan says he doesn't want the player to feel as if they don't have any charges, but to create some tension between one fight to the next. He goes on to say that Flask state is the main state of your character. I think I agree with Jonathan on some of the things said here. Arguably the best item in PoE 1 right now is the Mage Blood, which revolves entirely around Flask. But let's make sure we let Jonathan know our opinion about refilling Flask at a fountain in town. Please, we can make the town way more meaningful in other ways. Next up, the crafting bench isn't going anywhere. It remains a pivotal part of both the campaign and the endgame. The crafting bench plays a big role in player progression and strategy. It is important for new players to understand the bench. I hope the devs have a way to guide new players that respect the learning curve. When I first started playing Path of Exile, I completely avoided using the crafting bench because I was taught from other games that crafting takes many resources and is an endgame activity. But now that I'm more experienced, I use it commonly during my campaign progression. Speaking of the campaign, PoE 2 is expected to offer a more robust experience with no XP penalty in the campaign mode. This change might not drastically affect experienced players, but it's a nod to newcomers, easing them into the world of PoE. But I do have some concerns, as Jonathan mentioned that the campaign would be estimated at 40 to 50 hours for the average player. This number is very scary for a new player. 40 to 50 hours of gameplay is an incredible offer for a free-to-play game. But for someone who's more casual, this can be very daunting. I recently talked to a friend who I got into Path of Exile, and he absolutely despises going through the campaign in PoE 1. And for those reasons, he's skipping this league. Not sure if he will return. But for a new player like him, it takes 8 to 10 hours even with my help of gearing him up. Campaign has been a major factor in driving people away from PoE 1. Even in the community right now, there are always talks about campaign skips. The game isn't going to be dumbed down anytime soon, but with new challenges in Path of Exile 2, they will have to balance many things in favor of newcomers to the franchise. With that being said, let's talk about some of the challenges in PoE 2. Bosses. From watching plenty of videos and interviews about PoE 2, it seems like bosses are the biggest thing in PoE 2. The interview discussed a specific boss fight in the Mercenary trailer, where the mercenary character debuffs the boss and dodges attacks, leading to a situation where the boss is rapidly defeated after its health drops at about 30%. This quick defeat was attributed to a well-executed combination of skills rather than just stacking debuffs. Jonathan shared his personal experience with boss fight, noting how initially it took longer. However, as he learned the boss mechanics, he could defeat it more quickly. This reflects the game's design where understanding and adapting to boss mechanics can significantly increase damage output. It seems like PoE 2 aims to create challenging and engaging boss fights where understanding and skillfully executing combat mechanics are crucial. This approach is intended to be balanced for both single-player and multiplayer experiences. We will have to see for ourselves in the beta how this really holds up. Party play in PoE 1 is really just DPS and Aura bot. Sure, there are full teams that have different teams with different roles, but all you really need is a DPS and an Aura bot which buffs your defense and damage. In most instances, this is all you need to beat the hardest encounters in PoE. Let's see if PoE 2 can deliver on having different roles utilized in party play. But from everything I've seen so far, it seems like bossing builds are going to excel in PoE 2. One major thing to note is that portaling out of boss fights will reset the boss. There's a 2.5 second delay on casting portals in boss fights. Although portaling is instant outside of boss fights, this compiled with Flasks being harder to generate could be a major blockade in the campaign and something to test out in the beta. There's more to the endgame than just bossing. Specifically, we will still be having maps, but Jonathan mentioned there won't be an atlas tree, but there will be a new design system in place to customize your maps for the endgame. We can only speculate on what this could be. But Jonathan also breaks down some expectation in terms of loot in the endgame, where he explains that the loot should be a 1/3 split from the boss, 1/3 of the loot coming from the monsters within the map, and 1/3 from the league mechanic within the map itself. The main thing about loot I would like to know is how they're managing item drops and item filter. Currently, you have to use a third-party tool to filter out items, otherwise it would just clutter all over your screen. I hope to have an inbuilt item filter so they can optimize all the processing within the game themselves. How can we talk about loot without bringing up Magic Find, which will of course be in the game? MF will always be a polarizing topic, but seems that it's here to stay. Personally, I don't like this style of gameplay, but I don't mind anyone else from doing it. I've tried MF build last league and I felt exhausting keeping myself on edge the whole time I'm mapping so that I don't get one-shotted by random mobs. It felt like taxing gameplay, running to the boss, ghosting yourself, tagging enemies, getting altars, etc. But hey, if you like Magic Find, well, it's gonna be in Path of Exile too. In terms of the endgame, I'm personally more interested in what they do with alternate options. For example, how is Heist going to be implemented, and or will they have new ways to expand existing Path of Exile mechanics into their own version of the endgame? If they are truly getting rid of the Atlas tree, maybe they will have each mechanic with its own endgame. Finally, here are some announcements that were mentioned in the interview. We all want to know where the beta keys are and how to get them. Jonathan mentioned it would be similar to the 3.00 beta. So this isn't full confirmation on how to get them, but 3.00 beta conducted of 3 ways to get the keys. First was just a random invite from signing up with your email. Second, buying a supporter pack that included the key, which isn't available anywhere on the store currently. Or the third, having an accumulation of X amount of dollars. Now, based on my research, it seems it's around $400 to $500 total spent. The next interview in the radar is the Gazi interview with Jonathan Rogers at 9:30 p.m. Central EU time or 3:30 p.m. Eastern time NA on January 3rd. I want to see some in-depth minion discussion and I want to see how Gazi approaches this interview. Also, for console players, we don't have full information on anything console related yet. There are hints and talks about cross-platform, but there are no confirmations, so don't get baited into thinking this will be in the game. There will be an entire console discussion in the future when the PoE 2 team gives an update. Lastly, the MTX store will be shared across PoE 1 and PoE 2 with a work in progress MTX preview. That wraps up our summary of the interview with Jonathan Rogers conducted by Kripp. What do you think of the upcoming changes? New players, don't hesitate to share your opinions in the comments below. And remember, for more content, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon. Till next time, I'm Sid Vicious, and I'll see you later.